welcome to our very first WOWSI Community of Practice event, and it's a pleasure to have everybody here today. As some of you will no doubt be aware, we're coming towards the end of the first year of the project now. So whilst schools came on board in October, actually some of the colleagues on the call here have been part of the project for a year. So we had our very first training of WOWSI this week last year, and that was for our local experts. So those colleagues who run your skills groups, they had their training this time last year. So yeah, it's been a very, very busy year. But so I just wanted to bring people together today to kind of reflect on how this first year has gone, and also to share some of the very, very many successes we have seen so far with the project. So I think I've covered the recording. I wanted first of all to do some introductions for those of you who don't know all of the team. So I think pretty much everybody should know me because my name crops up and I was there for all of your training. But I'm Vic Machin and I'm the Schools and Colleges Mental Health and Emotional Wellbeing Advisor. But I am also the project lead for WOWSI. And I'm joined by some of my colleagues who are also part of the WOWSI team here with me today. So we've got colleagues from the Educational Psychology Service and also the dedicated schools team who are part of Early Help. And I also wanted just to let a couple of them introduce themselves because they're going to be co-presenting with me a bit later on. So I will come to Fran. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself, Fran?
Hi everybody, I'm Fran Parker and I'm Assistant Principal Educational Psychologist for Wellbeing, and I've been working alongside Vic from the onset of the project.
Thanks, Fran. Is Amelia here?
She should be.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Hi Amelia, sorry I've got lots of people on my screen.
Hi, that's okay. Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm an assistant psychologist for Thoughtful and the Educational Psychology Service, and I've been working on the kind of data management side of the WOWSI project.
Thank you. And Hannah.
Hi everybody, my name's Hannah Tor. I am a representative from the Parent Carer Forum.
Brilliant, thanks everybody. So the kind of things that I wanted to cover today are a bit of a background, and then we're going to talk very briefly about the WOWSI agreement, so what we provide versus what we ask schools to do as part of the agreement. And then we're going to be looking at some of the amazing successes that we've had as part of the project. And then Fran and Amelia will be talking about the project evaluation and sharing some more successes as well. And then we're going to hand over to Hannah, who is going to talk about how the West Sussex Parent Carer Forum is involved in WOWSI. And then we're going to kind of hand it over to you. I'm going to create some breakout rooms. So I know that can set the kind of cold shivers down some people. Please, it won't be intimidating. Quite often when I say breakout rooms, people start to drop off when they see it coming up on the agenda. Please do stay for the breakout rooms because it's really important that we hear your experiences and how you are finding the project. And then I'll be talking about next steps before we come to an opportunity to ask any questions at the end. I always say this when I'm presenting, I'm really not precious at all. Please do feel free to interrupt me at any point, either via the chat or you could just unmute and ask me a question. That's absolutely fine. So to give you some of the background to the project, which, as I said, we set up a year ago, the conversations, though, actually started 18 months ago. And we were speaking to colleagues in schools who were reporting an increase in child anxiety in school. But more than that, they were reporting a really marked increase in the number of parents who were coming and seeking help for school around child anxiety. And we knew that schools were doing a lot of this work of containing that anxiety and trying to kind of support that anxiety already. They were doing this work already, but actually they were doing it in kind of silos and pockets of isolation. Many people doing a brilliant job, but we know that sometimes it can be really difficult to know that you're doing the right thing and that you're kind of following evidence-based protocols, and that you know that what you're offering in school is really robust. So what we wanted to do was to think about how we could support schools to support those parents whose children are experiencing that kind of low level, mild to moderate anxiety. We also wanted to do this because we recognise that there are just a lack of services for children under age 11. We know that once they're 11, they can access they can access YMCA dialogue, but under the age of 11, there are just fewer services. So that was kind of the problem that we had in our minds. And then almost 2 years ago, actually, Johnny Welch, who leads our Thoughtful mental health support team, attended a conference where Norfolk and Waveney NHS Trust presented on a really exciting project that they'd launched. And this project was, to all intents and purposes, an early iteration of WOWSI, in that they had used their mental health support team staff to train school staff to deliver the Aussie intervention. So Johnny's ears pricked up and he was really interested, and he came back and said, we should do this. And I said, yes, Johnny, go ahead, do it through Thoughtful. And Johnny said, no, we don't have capacity for that. Thoughtful, as some of you know, have 90 staff, and there's just me in my role. So the project obviously came to me. And so here we are with 80 schools, 79 schools on board, and we decided that let's give it a go. The outcomes in Norfolk and Waveney seemed to be really good, and they only had a very small number of outcomes at that point, but it seemed really positive. So we thought, let's explore this. So we set up our project team. So some of the project team you will know. So Laura Ireland is our project coordinator. I'm not sure if Laura is on the call or if she is in a Thoughtful meeting at the moment.
I'm here.
Hi, Laura. Sorry,
Hello.
I thought you were in the Thoughtful meeting. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Because people might want to see your face because they see your emails all the time. Yeah.
They probably see my emails and think, oh no, not again. Yes, so I coordinate for Vic on the WOWSI project. So I will deal with all of your emails that come in, and all of our COA and Aussie bits and bobs. I just do behind the scenes stuff.
Thank you. Very important behind the scenes stuff. So Laura and I and Tanya, who is our Commissioner for Wellbeing in Schools and Colleges, are the core project team. And then we also have our steering group, who are really important members of our team as well. So as part of the steering group, we have us three from the project team. And then we also have Claire Dixon, who is the clinical lead for Thoughtful. We have Fran, who is our assistant principal educational psychologist, who's just introduced herself. And then we have originally we had the service lead from the Early Help Dedicated Schools team on the steering group. Karina Gibson, who is here as well, has stepped into that role. So Karina is our Dedicated Schools team representative on the steering group. And then we have Hannah from the Parent Carer Forum. And then we also have a school-based kind of advisor, really, in the form of Emily Webster, who works for the Every Child Partnership Trust. And then we also have a couple of head teachers on the steering group as well. So we wanted to make sure the steering group was really representative of everybody who would be involved in WOWSI, including parents, which is why Hannah joined our steering group. And then, of course, we have our project partners. So these are the people that are really delivering aspects of the project. So we've got the schools, thank you very much, who are really important partners. And then we also have various members of Thoughtful, the mental health support team, delivering parts of Aussie. We have our dedicated schools team workers. We have some other members of the Educational Psychology Service. And then we also have our MHST Research Clinic, which is based at Surrey University. And Fran will be talking a little bit about how we work in tandem with them later. And then a really important partner is COA Health, because COA own the licence for Aussie, and without them we wouldn't all be here. So it took us a while with all those people involved to kind of work out the delivery structure for the project, but as you can see on this slide, it actually is quite simple. So at the very top is Cathy Creswell and her team at Oxford University. Cathy created the Aussie platform, and she created it based on the book that she co-authored with her co-author Lucy Willett. And the book, known as the Pink Book in Thoughtful, is Helping Your Child with Fears and Worries. And so Cathy, during COVID, the book was being delivered as an intervention in many services, but during COVID we couldn't see people face to face. So Cathy created the Aussie platform during COVID, actually. And so it kind of grew from there. And then as WOWSI grew, Kathy couldn't hold it all herself, so she sold the licenses out to Coa Health, and it's from them that we buy our license to be able to deliver WOWSI, and it's also from them that we had our training. And originally Coa ran some skills groups for our local experts. So our local experts are the people that run your skills groups, so they were having skills groups themselves from Coa. And then the local experts so they deliver the skills groups to our school-based facilitators, who could be school staff, or in some cases our early help dedicated schools team staff. And then of course you all deliver the intervention to the parents, who then deliver to the children. So it's quite a nice trickle down situation for all of our children that are receiving the WOWSI intervention are really receiving it in the way that Kathy Creswell and her team at Oxford University intended it to be. And it was really important that we had this delivery structure in place, because we had to do some quite hard negotiating with Kathy to get her to sign this off and agree that we could give it a go, because it was designed to be delivered by clinical therapists, really, so CBT experienced and trained members of CAMS teams and mental health support teams. So Kathy wanted to really make sure that the way we delivered it, there would be no dilution to the intervention, and that we'd be practicing safely. So yeah, this has all been signed off from the very top, Kathy herself. So we're really, really pleased that actually the structure we put in place seems to be working well. So before I come on to some of the ways that it is working well and some of the brilliant successes that we're seeing, I just wanted to highlight the project agreement that all of the schools signed. So some of the schools, a small number of schools, have West Sussex early help dedicated schools team facilitators. So this bit, they had a different agreement, but the majority of schools, though, signed the agreement that I'm just going to talk you quickly through now. So as part of the agreement, which some of you will have signed in October and some of your schools will have signed in March, we agreed as West Sussex to provide free access to the WOWSI platform until July 2026. We provided the 2 days of initial training and ongoing support via skills groups. We also said that we would set up this community of practice, with the first of which events of this one. And then also the WOWSI Padlet, which is where you can find all of our scripts for how to approach parents, our letters to send out, our leaflets to put in staff rooms, so that other members of staff might be able to refer some families to you if they recognise that there were children in their classes who might benefit from WOWSI. And then on the schools part, the schools agreed that they would attend the training and then attend skills groups regularly. So the agreement is that schools will attend, the school-based facilitators will attend skills groups, 70% of the skills groups offered, and then deliver the intervention to at least one family per half term, or 2 families per term. You are very welcome to run more than that, absolutely. But most schools at the moment, and I know we do have some that are delivering way more than that at the moment, but most schools have found that for these first 2 terms, they've been delivering 1 per term. But we are hoping to see that increase as people become more confident with the intervention. So based on that agreement, we had initial modelling of the project, and you can see down the right-hand side of this table that these were the figures that we kind of were aiming for in terms of where we would be with the number of interventions delivered. So we hoped that by the end of the spring term, everybody in phase 1 would have completed 1 case, which would bring us to 35, because we initially trained 40, we had some schools drop out. And then by the end of the summer term, phase 1 would have completed in the original modelling two more cases, and phase 2 would have completed 1 case, which would bring us to 112. And then building up that pattern of 2 cases per term over the following academic year, we hoped we'd have around 586 completed cases by the end of the project in July 2026. However, at the moment, if you look at the kind of snail diagram on the left-hand side, it's not quite a pie chart, you'll see that we've got 107 cases that have started, and we've got 47 that have completed. So although we hoped that we would have 112 started and completed cases by now. We've got 107 started, so in terms of starting cases, we're looking good. In terms of completed cases, we're on 47. However, this is a pilot project, and we are flexible and adaptable, and we know that starting things can be tricky, and we know that schools are really busy places. So we've adapted our modelling and taking it from the point we're at now, so 47 cases completed across the 2 phases. We have kind of rejigged our modelling, and we're hoping that if people can kind of look at picking up to that 2 cases per term or 1 per half term, that by the end of the autumn term, our phase 1 schools should have completed between 2 to 4 cases. So even if you haven't done any yet, you could still pick up those 2 cases next term. And our phase 2 schools should have completed 2 to 3 cases by Christmas. And then that extrapolates out as we carry on adding 2 cases per term to around 521 cases across the project by July 2026. There will be more cases added to this, though, because we have decided that we are more than likely going to move ahead with a phase 3, which will see additional schools added. So we're hoping that we'll have around 600 cases completed by the end of the project. And 600 is a really good number of cases that should give us lots of evidence to show whether or not this intervention is viable to be delivered in this format through schools, and hopefully that will see future funding secured once we can show those outcomes. Now, if you're looking at the last slide and thinking, oh gosh, I think I'm one of those schools that might be a bit behind, then please don't worry, because we do have plans in place. So at the moment, we have 2 phase 1 schools who haven't had any cases, and then we've had 9 phase 2 schools who haven't been able to start a case, and that's okay. We know that things can take some time to get up and running, and that things change really rapidly in schools, and that quite often you can be in firefighting mode and things come up and get in the way, and you're reacting to lots of different things going on. So please don't panic if you're in that situation. We've also had 7 phase 1 schools who did a first case in the spring term, did really well, and then haven't been able to pick up a second case in the summer term. And again, that's absolutely fine. So we've got 18 schools who we'd really like to support to continue with the WOWSI project. So those 18 schools will receive an email this week, just checking in with you, seeing if there's anything we can do to support you to be able to deliver the project and to be able to access the intervention for your families. And then in September, we will be able to offer you some problem solving to really help you to see if WOWSI is right for you, and if you still feel it is right for you, how we can support you to get going with the intervention. But what we have said is, because of commissioning and finances, we do need to ensure that every school in the project is able to participate. So by October half term, if anybody still hasn't been able to start with a family, then we'll be checking in, and if you still haven't been able to start with a family, we will probably assume that by October half term, it's because you don't have the capacity to deliver the intervention, and that's okay. But we wouldn't want anyone to be accessing the intervention and the website without our oversight. So if you haven't picked up a case by October half term, we will be kind of revoking your access from the platform. But I'm really hoping that that's not going to be the case for anybody, unless it's something that you feel actually this isn't right for us at this time, and it's a decision that you feel is a positive one to make for your school. However, as you can see from this slide, we do have some schools who are going above and beyond our expectations and really pushing the boat out with the work they're doing with WOWSI. They're doing really well in terms of their case numbers. And I just wanted to recognise these schools and the work they're doing. So well done to these schools. When you go into breakout rooms, if you're in a breakout room with any of these schools, then, or if you are one of these schools, then please do share your tips and ideas with colleagues about how you're keeping the momentum going, because that would be really helpful for everybody to hear, what is working well in these schools. So I'm going to move on now to share some of the really hard data, and it's really exciting and really positive data, and I'm hoping that as we go through it you will feel the sense of pride that we've all felt when we've been able to see the data. So it's really important, I think, that I share the context with you. So our data is being compared to a controlled trial of WOWSI, and that control trial was carried out under Kathy Creswell's supervision between December 2020 and August 2022. And while Kathy wrote the intervention for online use during COVID, she wanted to see, actually, is this a sustainable way to deliver the helping your child with fears and worries intervention? It's really important to note that we are delivering the intervention as school-based facilitators. So some of you are based in schools and some of you are our dedicated schools team facilitators. And what you're being compared to is a control trial of experienced, trained, clinical practitioners. So you can see here 28 of the services involved in the control trial were NHS trusts, and that does include us here. So Thoughtful were involved in the control trial through our SPFT colleagues. And then the control trial also had 3 charities and 2 local authorities who were part of that, but all of them were trained clinicians. So as we go through the data, please do bear in mind that we're not comparing like for like. We're not comparing school-based facilitator delivery to school-based facilitator delivery, because there isn't the data, because there's only us and Norfolk that are doing it like this. It can be interesting to understand the extent of the control trial. So the control trial covered 349 families. And what happened is those 349 families were then randomly sorted into either accessing WOWSI or accessing that service's treatment as usual. So that could be whatever that service usually offers for child anxiety. So they wanted to see if there was any inferiority in delivering online versus doing it face to face. And the study showed that there wasn't any inferiority at all, that actually delivering the intervention online was had just as positive outcomes as delivering it in clinic as those services usually would. So when we look at the data I'm about to show you, you are being compared to the 181 families who completed WOWSI as part of COCAT. So the results do really speak for themselves. And hopefully this animation is going to work. I know that's kind of small. You will get the slides and the recorded version of this as well, but hopefully you can see the graphs at least. So this first slide graph is the RCADS. So those of you who are delivering WOWSI will know that RCADS is our revised child anxiety and depression scale. And it asks parents to fill in 47 questions that look at the symptoms of separation anxiety, social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and low mood. And it adds all those scores up, and it looks at the beginning of the intervention, how we measure what those symptoms being measured at the end of the intervention, how are those symptoms, and comparing the two. So our schools are in the royal blue colour and the control trial is in the turquoise colour. So from the RCAD, you can see that we are making really good progress. So we're seeing about a 20% drop in those symptoms of anxiety and low mood from the beginning of the intervention to the end of the intervention, which is, compared to the control trial where they're trained therapists, is a really good outcome. And remember that for most of these people, this is the very first intervention. We've only had a few schools that have done 2 interventions. So this is the very first time people are delivering this. And this is the outcome we're seeing. And it's really, really positive. We then have the Child Anxiety Interference Scale. And this one actually is the preferred method of routine outcome measure for Kathy Creswell's team, because whereas the RCAS looks at the symptoms of anxiety and low mood, The case looks at how much the anxiety is impacting on the child and the family's life. So it looks at how it's impacting them in terms of school, how it's impacting them in terms of social impairment, as in out in the community, how it impacts their home and family life, and how it impacts their friendships. And as you can see here, our children actually start off having a higher level of impact from their anxiety compared to the control trial. And I think the reason for this is that the control trial, they might not have put children forward, or families forward, for the control trial if they thought that they could offer them something more kind of a higher level. Whereas for schools, quite often this is the intervention you have to offer. So actually you're offering it to a broader range of children, and some of those children will have higher levels of anxiety. So yes, our children are typically coming in with those higher levels of impact of their anxiety than the control trial. However, you can see the journey travelled by the end of the intervention is very similar. So around a 30% in a reduction in the impact of the anxiety the child is facing. So that is really a credit to all of you. It's such brilliant outcomes that we're seeing. And then in the bottom left corner, this is the session rating scale. When I was doing one-to-one work with children and families, this was the one thing that kind of made me feel a bit uncomfortable, really. So at the end of every session, so all of the check-ins that parents have with you, they are asked to rate that session. And they are asked to rate it on the quality of what we would call the therapeutic relationship, just the relationship, the quality of the relationship between you and the parent. How focused they felt the conversation was around working towards their child's goals, the approach that you're taking in working with the parents, and then just an overall feeling about how the session went. And so they're asked to rate out of 40 the combined score for each session. And as you can see, you in schools are hardly dropping any points on that at all, almost 100% kind of positive outcomes from parents in terms of how they rate their sessions. So a huge thank you and a massive credit to all of you doing this work, because you're very slightly above the trained therapists in terms of that, of creating that therapeutic relationship and carrying out those sessions. And then the big one really, our goal-based outcomes have been incredible. So again, we're in the blue. So for those of you who aren't currently delivering WOWSI, families are asked to focus on 2 to 3 goals that they make themselves. They decide what the goals are, and every session they're asked to rate how close they feel towards those goals, and so on a scale of 0 to 10. And so you can see in the royal blue at the beginning of the intervention, our children are rating themselves, and families are rating themselves around a 1 out of 10 towards reaching the goals they're working towards around their anxiety. And by the end of the intervention, they're rating themselves almost at a 7. And what we do know is that after the intervention has finished, they will continue to make progress towards those goals. So even though they're not averagely at a 10, and we have seen lots of 10s, actually we know that they will carry on making progress and reaching those goals in the future. So as you can see, our children start at a lower, they rate themselves at a lower score for how close they feel to reaching those goals, and by the end of the intervention they are rating themselves higher than the control trial. So really just a huge well done, because those outcomes are massively impressive, to the point where yeah, exactly, thank you whoever did the clapping, to the point where Kathy Creswell got, because she can see our outcomes, Kathy Creswell got involved, got in contact with me and said, we are so impressed with how your schools are doing, could you come and speak to an NHS conference over the summer about how you're delivering WOWSI in your settings. So quite nerve-wracking for me, because I'm not a psychologist by background. I am going to be speaking alongside psychologists at an NHS conference in the summer to talk about how we are delivering WOWSI and how it's going. So thank you so much for all of your hard work on this, because those outcomes are really incredible. We had really high hopes for the outcomes. but these are above and beyond what even we had hoped. And just as another slide there, just to highlight, in terms of those goal-based outcomes, you are seeing an 84% improvement in positive movement towards the children's goals, whereas the control trial saw a 68% improvement. So it's really interesting to we can hypothesize about why we think we are seeing such incredible outcomes. We talk about this in our steering group all the time, and I think for us, we really put it down to the quality of your relationship with your parents and children. So you know those children. A therapist doesn't know the children they're working with. They meet them for the first time on session 1. So when they're helping the parents to form goals, they don't know what's going to work well for that family. They don't know the context of that family, whereas you do. And actually, this is amazing data to show just how important actually those relationships are. And I think Fran's going to be talking a little bit about that a bit later as well. I'm going to pause for a second. And does anyone have any questions about anything I've talked about so far? Yep. Okie dokie. I will move on just to share one of the very, very many success stories. So obviously I've anonymized this, and somebody here might recognize this case, but this was a year 1 child who was experiencing separation anxiety. I would say when I look at the data we're getting, most of the children are kind of between year 3 and 5 that we're seeing in the project. So this year 1 child is one of our very, very youngest children that we're working with. And this is their child anxiety interference scale, so the case. So you can see that the interference, that the impact the anxiety was having on this very young child at the beginning, before treatment in the blue, fell really considerably by the end of the intervention. So the total score of anxiety impact has come down really quite considerably. And you can see that they're seeing a really positive school impact. There's been some impact in their social anxiety, and there's been a good impact at home as well. So for this family, this is going to make such a difference. And then this is the same child's ARCADS in terms of separation anxiety. So as I said before, Kathy Creswell herself says that the scale they prefer to use is the child anxiety interference scale, because that is showing the impact it's having on the child's life. But interesting still to look at the ARCADS and just see those symptoms and see actually that, yes, the symptoms have also followed that kind of downward trajectory over the course of the intervention. But what I find really magical when I look at some of the outcomes from the interventions is holding the child at the centre and looking at those goals they're working towards. So this child wanted to be able to walk into school positively for 2 weeks, so 10 school days, and the parents are already working towards this. And at module 1, mum and the child spoke about this, and the child gave themselves 1 out of 10. There's no way I can possibly imagine doing that by the end of this intervention. By the end of the intervention, they were scoring themselves at, I'm going to have a closer look, at an 8 for that. So really, really positive movement towards, they've nearly met that goal. They've nearly walked into school positively for 2 weeks. And that's such a fantastic outcome for that child. And then we have got their second goal was to tell mummy about one thing they were learning at school every day with confidence. So this sounds to me like a child who kind of came out of school and didn't want to talk about school to parents, just kind of had that kind of closed attitude, didn't want to talk about it. Perhaps it was too anxiety provoking. And again, you can see, and this is a classic example of setback and recovery. So we can see that the child made really good progress towards that goal, and then something happened that week. We don't know what happened. Perhaps one of you does know what happened. Maybe they didn't go into school that week, so they didn't have anything positive to feedback about. We don't really know. Maybe they just had a really bad week, but by the end of the intervention, they had recovered back onto that upwards trajectory, and I'm hoping that family have continued. But the really lovely goal outcome that they've worked towards that will have the biggest impact, I think, on their family is that the child wanted to feel safe at bedtime without mummy. And that was mummy's goal too, because mummy didn't want to be sharing beds anymore. So at the beginning of the intervention, child scored themselves as a 1. Very, very far away from being able to do that. by the end of the intervention, the child was scoring themselves at a 9. They were feeling really positive about being able to have that bedtime and no more sharing bed. So I would guess, from having worked with goal-based outcomes before, I would guess that means the child is doing it most days, but not quite yet every day. But that is such a brilliant outcome, and it will make such a difference, not just to that child, but to the family as well. You know, mum's going to get her evenings back. She's not going to be taking that child to bed and lying with her. It's just brilliant. But we've seen so many amazing outcomes like that. So we've had children who have never previously been able to walk in through the school gate when everybody else does. They kind of come in later when it's less busy, who have now been able to come into school really confidently, which has also impacted the sibling, because the sibling was having to go in later as well, but now the sibling was coming to school at the same time. And we had one family where the child had a lot of separation anxiety, but particularly towards mum, and wasn't able to let mum do really anything without the child. So one of their goals was for mum to be able to walk the dog and have that headspace for herself without the child needing to go with her, and they achieved that. And one of the other goals was for mum to have some one-to-one time with the other sibling, and they achieved that as well. But one of my absolute favorite outcomes was really early on, actually. So phase 1, a family got going really quickly with the intervention, and mum really wanted to go to her work's Christmas party. But at that time, she was putting the child to bed every night. Child wouldn't have any other adult putting her to bed, couldn't entertain the idea of staying in the house without mum, staying in bed if mum was out of the house. But mum went to the Christmas party while grandma babysat, which again is just a huge, huge outcome for that particular family, because it will have such massive ramifications around how they function. So again, a huge, huge well done to everybody, because we are seeing dozens of these really lovely stories and outcomes coming out. And to talk a bit more about some of the positives that we're seeing, I'm going to hand over to Fran and Amelia. I will stop sharing and let you put your slides up.
Okay, I'm going to share then, Amelia. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Sure. It's not letting me share in Teams.
I can get the slides. Hang on.
We've just done a bit of a couple of edits though, so I'll just yeah.
Amelia sent me the edits at 3:05. Is that the latest one?
I don't know. Sorry.
I'll share the live presentation.
Can you share it, Amelia? Sorry.
Yeah. See if it lets me. If not, I'll send it. Share.
Perfect. Thanks, Amelia.
Okay. Unfortunately, my screen has frozen, but I can see my slides in front of me. So we're just on the WOWSI research overview. Have we got that slide up?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, hi everybody. I'm Fran Parker and I'm Assistant Principal Educational Psychologist. And the data that you have all been providing via the packs that you've been filling in, but also the data that the parents have been filling in on the WOWSI platform, is contributing to a formal research methodology that we're working on. And we're currently producing an interim report based on the data we have of the impact of this work on the cases up until summer 25. And the plan is to publish a peer-reviewed journal article after summer 26 with all the data collected. So we're working with the research clinic, and you can see some of the people involved there, along with those from our service. As we're working with Amelia, who's here today, and Claire Dixon, who's a clinical psychologist, myself, and Tanya Proctor, and Vic, who you know well, and we've been working together as a research group. And we have some questions to ask, and with research, as I'm sure you all know, each question will then have certain ways of collecting the data, so certain checklists or standardised assessments will collect the data. We were not allowed to produce an electronic version of the standardized data because of copyright. Hence, that's why we're having to use the PDFs. So the aims and objectives with the questions we're asking is WOWSI an effective, feasible and acceptable intervention when delivered by school staff in schools? And what we're finding is yes, it is, which is absolutely fascinating, really, because it, as we mentioned earlier, Vic mentioned earlier, about the importance of relationships between staff and parents, and clearly between parents and their children. And we know evidence categorically shows that it is the relationship between the therapist, if I'm going to use this word for today, and the person that's receiving the therapy on the outcome. So we're hypothesizing that the relationships are an important feature of the success shown in some of the data. We want to know, does the training and the delivery of WOWSI lead to improved knowledge, skills and experience of school staff? And we also want to know whether WOWSI, when delivered by school staff, leads to improvements in inclusion and education as perceived by parents, children and teachers. So the just going back to that, WOWSI is aimed at reducing anxiety presentation in children. However, we're interested in a side effect of that, in another outcome, to see whether actually there are improvements in those early signs of EBSA, which we know are somatic complaints, or children that are showing anxiety in school won't enter classrooms, won't put the hand up, are very quiet in class, etc. So we're kind of interested to see, actually, is there any difference in the child's presentation? So there's been a parent and child pack and a school pack, and the parent child pack is like sent pre, the school pack sent pre, and then we do the post packs as well. And then Amelia collects the data and adds the scores for each question on each of those questionnaires to a massive spreadsheet that is forming, that will be analysed via some SPSS. So just in terms of data collection, we've got the ARCADS 47 is completed by the parents and the GBOs. That this is what Vic's just talked about. Sorry, on the data collection page.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the parent and child, so the child has an ARCADS 25, and this is something that the child would fill in with parent support at home. However, if that's not working, you can just do it in school with the child. It doesn't have to be the parent that does it with them. The reason that we did this is because we wanted to take pressure off you working in schools. But, you know, you could do it with the child in school. And then there's a parent scared. Now they have to fill that in. And that gives us different information because it has a school avoidance subscale, which we can pull out to see whether there's a difference between the pre and post school avoidance. So that's why that's an important scale to fill in terms of our methodology. And then we have the child scared, and this schedule, this standardized checklist, also has a school avoidance subtest on it. The demographic sheet, we have to get the demographics in terms of the research. And the teacher pack has got a school avoidance subtest as a school avoidance the school anxiety test, the school anxiety scale. And we've also got an attendance sheet because we're looking at to see whether the overall percentage of attendance improves. And post-evaluation 2 questions. You can see here at the end we ask a question about, has there been an improvement in the child's presentation in the morning when entering school, and has there been an improvement in the child's presentation in the morning when entering the classroom? Because what we know is that children might get into school, however they will not necessarily be in the classroom. They just get past the front door and that's it, and they don't actually get into the classroom. And then I'm going to hand over to Amelia.
Yeah, so we just thought we could feed back a bit about all the numbers of cases and packs we received, because I'm sure I've emailed most of you here sending all the packs out, and I know it's a lot of information. And then often a lot of coordinating on your part, from getting the packs from the teacher, getting the packs from the parent and everything. So I thought it might be just quite nice to see what we've got so far. So in terms of cases who have completed the pre-evaluation packs, and this is complete evaluation packs, so we have all of those 4 forms from the parent-child pack and then the 2 forms from the teacher pack. From phase 1, we've received 33 packs, and from phase 2, we've already received 23 packs. And then looking at cases who've completed module 6, of those 33, we have 29 who have completed module 6, and 23 of those 29 have then sent in their post-evaluation packs, although that's now 24 because someone sent me one today. And then from phase 2 of the 23, obviously not many people have yet got to module 6. So we had 3 who have got to module 6, and then obviously we've got I would think actually that might be up to 1 we've received from phase 2. So that's exciting in terms of post-evaluation packs. Yeah, so it's nice to kind of see. And that's all being populated on a spreadsheet. And then from those packs, we've done a little bit of preliminary data analysis. So like Fran was talking about, kind of focusing on those school avoidance subscales, knowing that kind of EBSA is such a big issue at the moment. Looking at the scared measures in particular, on the child scared, we have an average pre-avoidance subscale score of 4.4, which I know probably doesn't mean that much, and then we have a post-avoidance subscale score of 3.9. So we've got a reduction there, and the lower the score, the better it is. So that's a good reduction that we're seeing. And then similarly, we're seeing an even greater reduction in the parents' belief of the score, and that we might think that perhaps the children's reduction is lower because perhaps they're more harsh on themselves and they're not maybe willing to admit their progress as much. So I think that's really positive that we're seeing that massive reduction.
And I think another hypothesis about that is that it is the parent who is dealing with the difficulty of getting their child into school. So the difference to them is greater. So I think it's within 6 weeks to see that level of reduction is absolutely astounding, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I think I see the pre and post ARCAD scores on WOWSI next to each other, and seeing some of them go from a 3 to a 1 or a 2 to a 0 in such a short space of time is really, really lovely to see. And then if we're looking at the pre and post school avoidance subscale on the teacher SAS, this is again just of the packs we've received where we've got both the pre and post data. We've got an average pre-score of 5.33 and an average post score of 4.77. So again, we see that reduction of over 10%.
And what's interesting about this is that the teacher has got nothing to do with the intervention, as you all know. So they've got nothing to do with the intervention. They don't understand the different modules in WOWSI. However, they're noticing a difference in how the child's presenting in their class. So we are seeing a generalisation of the WOWSI intervention into the classroom, which we hypothesised could happen. And according to this data, yes, it is happening.
Yeah. And then we kind of have that qualitative data that we've been collecting from those 2 questions that I think back it up, and over and above that 10% really show exactly what we were kind of hoping for. So I did a little bit of a very small thematic analysis of those responses we've been getting with those 2 questions, which I think were a really valuable addition to those post packs. And I think the first theme we saw was improved emotional regulation and confidence on arrival. And we've got some quotes here. X has left caregiver without tears or lingering cuddles, much more prepared to come into school, more open, confident in presentation, no longer tearful. X goes into school happy, no tears and waves at mum at the gate, happier coming in. She seems happy and more smiley. So even within just those like really small number of 23 packs, we're seeing those common themes across the packs emerging of that consistent improved regulation and confidence. And then for a second theme, we've got increased independence in transition and routines, highlighting a kind of reduced reliance on adult support, which I know is so valuable for teachers who are so limited on resources these days in the classroom and have their attention being pulled in a million different ways. So having that kind of improvement in coming directly into the classroom, not needing that one-on-one, working independently in the mornings, and kind of managing their own emotions a little bit better, and hopefully using the strategies they've learnt within the intervention. So I think that's also a really lovely outcome that we've seen. And then finally, I mean, this is also lovely, enhanced social engagement and school belonging. We've seen from the quotes like more social interaction, greater engagement with learning, happier coming into school, kind of making those connections maybe more with their peers through this increased confidence. I think all those three themes are very much linked, aren't they? Improvements in sociability.
So the research methodology is we're collecting data there from the child, from the parent, from the class teacher, and then the WOWSI data as well. And then we're also asking the facilitators in the school about the impact of training. So it's a very wide triangulation. You know, if you're having a Viva, you'd be doing well with the amount of data. And then obviously the more cases that come in, the more data we get on the cases, the stronger it's going to be and the more robust we can feel about the data we've collected as the numbers get bigger. So for those of you that have completed the packs, thank you. And I would really encourage you to carry on and support parents with completing the parent scared, the child scared could be done in school, and the post pack. We can't force anybody to complete any questionnaires. You know, you can opt out, of course you can, but where you can, support the completion of them. And Amelia does follow up in the emails. You can see just how important this data is, and also how inspiring it is to actually see what's happening in schools. You know, it's very reassuring, so you know as practitioners that the thing that you're doing with parents is actually having a very immediate and clear impact. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fran and Amelia. Does anybody have any questions or comments from Fran and Amelia about our in-house evaluation? We will, of course, keep you up to date as we get more information back from the evaluation, and obviously when we do publish, we will, of course, let everybody know and share that very widely. I'm going to hand over to Hannah now, who's going to talk about the West Sussex Parent Carers Forum's role in the WOWSI project. So thanks, Hannah.
Thank you. Let's see if mine shares. Can you see that, Vic?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yay, that's good. I was expecting it to go wrong. So I'm not going to be speaking for too long, but I did want to speak about the involvement that the Parent Carer Forum has had with WOWSI so far. So it all started about 18 months ago, and we were invited to attend the steering group. And this was before there was any sort of discussion about whether we would be involved with the project. But it was just to make sure that that parent voice was present from the get-go, which is amazing. And obviously we feel really valued to be invited into these spaces. And I spoke a little bit about some lived experience, and I said, you know, I've had a child that's really struggled with experiencing anxiety and school, and consequently I was a really anxious parent as well, and I feel as though we got stuck in a loop together, which is really normal, and a lot of parents experience that. So we spoke about what we thought could help parents and in turn help their children with managing anxiety. wider than the WOWSI platform itself. So we spoke about the fact that obviously parents and children experience anxiety together, and parents often, as we all do, give everything to their children and completely neglect themselves, and they then in turn can become really anxious and overwhelmed themselves. And you can get stuck in that cycle together. And it explains why a lot of parents are going into the schools and raising concerns about their children's mental health and well-being, why there's such an increase in referrals to SPOA, to CAMS, to YES. And I completely empathise, as I'm sure most of us do here, in that there is so much for parents to be anxious about these days. It's not surprising that actually they're feeling very overwhelmed themselves. Partnerships and relationships can become fragmented and strained. All of us know that sometimes working with individuals when they're completely overwhelmed, really high stress, can be really stressful. And that can then affect the way that we work with people and the experiences of individuals. And it's not conducive with good outcomes for anybody. And so you can find yourself as a parent being that person that stood at the school gates, and your child is fussing and is getting themselves really overwhelmed, and you're really overwhelmed, and the parents stop talking to you and you feel really isolated. And then you feel as though you just can't meet the simple expectations of getting your child into school or to wear the appropriate footwear. And you feel isolated as well as your child feeling isolated. And as we know, little people often look to themselves and place blame upon themselves, which in turn increases their anxiety. So we thought, what can we do to help alongside the WOWSI intervention? And we spoke about peer-to-peer support. And we know that there's so much research and experience that is positive around peer-to-peer support for parents. So we are a SEND charity. We work with parent carers who have children with SEND needs, but our landscape is evolving to move towards working with parents of children with mental health difficulties as well. Now, I know that that's not necessarily what we're talking about here, but what we do know is that children who experience intense anxiety at a young age can go on to experience, further difficulties later in life with their mental health. So we thought, great, this is an opportunity for us to get in early with parents, support them, and provide that peer-to-peer support. So far we've held 3 online sessions, and it's held by 2 of our members of staff who have lived experience of their child or young person experiencing intense anxiety. And it's been a lovely, calm space for parents to come along and bond with other parents and feel included again, I suppose, in their kind of cohort. And we did have one parent who joined us a couple of weeks ago with a glass of wine in hand, and it was hilarious because she just kept dropping her phone and we were all having a giggle about it. And it was very sweet, very encouraging, and everybody was just able to be themselves and feel as though there was space made for them. So for lots of parents, it might be, no, not another social situation. I don't want to talk to other people, and that's absolutely fine. So we do make sure that when we send out a newsletter to all of you guys, the schools, to share with parents, and it's now on the Padlet, that we include what other things we have going on offer as well within the Parent Carer Forum. So this is our June offer. Our September offer will be coming out shortly, so you will all receive a revised newsletter. We do things like mental health first aid workshops, what can be done to support children within mainstream settings, so without the requirement of an EHCP and a specialist setting. We also then have chat and chill sessions across the county where parents can come along, meet with us in person, have a cup of tea, chill out. Sometimes it's in the evening, sometimes there can be wine. We do also do find it out sessions where we will have speakers come along and provide information to parents in a webinar format. And then we have Your Voice Heard, which is a relatively new approach where we have some very brave speakers come along representing education, social care and health. And it's an opportunity for parents to feed back in a supportive environment, but they can be really challenging about their experiences and feedback some positive but mostly negative experiences, and it actually gives them a feeling of being empowered and that their voice really matters. So I would welcome all of you to join our community as professionals. We have got over 2,000 members now of parent carers within West Sussex and professional members. And it just means that you get direct communication from us about the offer that we will be providing within West Sussex for parent carers. And as I say, we are also looking to extend our remit to those who might not consider themselves to be a parent carer, but might be experiencing SEND in other ways. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah. And I know there have been a few questions about kind of, can I send parents to the parent carer WOWSI support, even if they're not doing WOWSI? And Hannah and I and the rest of the steering group spoke about this, and we think it's really important that we reach as many parents as possible. So if you've got parents who are doing WOWSI, obviously they're welcome to come to those sessions. If there's parents that have finished with WOWSI, they can come. But also, if you've got parents who are just considering it, or who you think would be good candidates, or who actually their child is anxious, but they don't feel that WOWSI is right for them, then absolutely, you know, the Parent Carer Forum sessions are there to support those parents. And you never know, if they join other parents that have done WOWSI and they're feeling a bit kind of reticent about it themselves, then having those conversations actually might be the thing that gives them the support to go to come back to you and say, actually, I'm going to give that a go because I've spoken to some other parents that have done it and actually it sounds okay. So that's the kind of remit of those sessions. For us, it was really important to have this element because WOWSI Online is brilliant, and it opens up the intervention to so many parents that wouldn't have time to do a one-to-one intervention, or who don't want to sit and talk to a therapist, for example. But it does leave out a really important element, which is when we run Cathy Creswell intervention as a group, there is some magic there in parents supporting each other, and that's what's missing from the online intervention. So actually, this provides that element of support to parents that is missing from the online intervention. So it's not mandatory at all, but it's a really, really good opportunity for parents to come together. Any questions for Hannah? Okie dokie. I will come back to my slides then. Okay, my laptop has completely forgotten that I'd started this presentation, so I'm going to have to find where we were up to. I've done the evaluation update. These are the wrong set of slides, are they? Hang on. Let me stop sharing that one and try again. There we go, that's better. So we've done project evaluation, we've done parent care reform. So really now what I wanted to do was give you an opportunity to share how your involvement with the WOWSI project has been so far. So I have created a few breakout rooms. I'm sorry if that triggers anybody. Honestly, please stay and join the breakout rooms, because this is the way that we can get some feedback from you. And I just wanted you to think about what's gone well for you in terms of WOWSI. If possible, share a success story, because as we've seen earlier, it's those narratives that really make the project come to life. Have there been any barriers for you when you've been setting up WOWSI? Any surprises in what you found in the outcomes, or how it's gone, or anything like that? And any just general feedback? Can I ask you to either take a screenshot or take a picture with your phone of the slides, so you've got those questions in front of you? I will give you 10 minutes in your breakout rooms, so about 4:45 we will come back, but you will find there's about 5 of you in each of the breakout rooms. Yeah, and I will see you shortly. So yeah, hopefully you'll have some really interesting conversations, and there'll be a few minutes to feedback when you come back. As I said before, I will stop the recording, so don't worry, no breakout rooms will be recorded. So if this works, you should be flying to your virtual rooms right now. Undoubtedly, there will be some glitches. So if you get kicked out of your breakout room, you will appear back in this room and I will put you back in, hopefully. Cool. I think that is everybody in schools has been, or who are delivering in schools, possibly almost everybody should be in a group. Let me just check. Is there anybody from a school still here?
I can't see anyone from a school in the list that's left.
Fab. Cool. Brilliant. I'll stop sharing the slides and I'll stop the recording. And so